without
Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results will always be positive. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. So tonight is Super Bowl Sunday. My friends are in the other room watching the Super Bowl. That's fine. It's a little bit of a low-scoring game. I might turn it on over here about halftime. We'll see what happens. You know, throughout history, gold has always played an important role in the international monetary system. Tonight, I have Suzanne Ross coming on as my co-host, and we're going to bring two more of the presenters at the Beyond the Matrix 5D Ascension Conference that is going to be held March 19th and 20th in Sedona, Arizona. I highly recommend that you go to the link at x2radio.com or x2-radio.com and click on the events button on the left-hand side and register. Use the promo code Brooks10, Brooks 10. If you use that, you'll get 10% off, and it is well worth it. It's one of the most affordable conferences you're going to go to in 2019. What we're going to be talking about tonight is the global reset and how we have come here to this point, the same as other nations before us. The Romans and the Byzantine Empire and even the United States, not in 1929, but in 1921. And we recovered from it because there were certain free market forces in place, and that's why you don't really hear about it, because the free market just recovered from it. You know, the earliest known use of gold was, 645 BC. And this was in, what we would call Turkey today, Lydia in those days. And at that time, gold was part of a naturally occurring compound known as electrum, which the Lydians used to make coins, same as we did in the early days of America. By 500 BC, we're talking 145 years. That's about, a little over half the time that the United States has existed. They figured out how to separate the gold from the silver, thus creating the first truly gold coin. Now, there was a time when paper money was backed by gold in this country. And, it was known as the gold standard. Most people my age remember those days. The gold standard was essentially this. It was a promise that if you had $1, you could take it to the government at any time and trade it in for a fixed amount of gold. Now, it wouldn't be much, $1, but it would be some gold. In the early part of the 20th century, all of the world's key economies, all of them in the entire world, were based on gold. And this worked very well. It was very stable because gold doesn't rust, it doesn't waste away, and it's rare. And this rarity and the quality of this metal is what has made it such a standard of money for way over 2,000 years. So a lot of you don't understand what the gold standard is and what the global reset might actually do. But that's what we're going to discuss tonight. And it's going to be interesting. So if you're listening to this as a live broadcast, of course, you can call in. The number is 213-233-3998, 213-233-3998. We will have 4 of us on, but we can always take one more, and we can definitely take your question either by in the chat room at tfrlive.com. The chat room is free. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to to sign up. Or if I can get over to it quick enough, to my YouTube live channel at Brooks Agnew, and I will check the streaming text there. That's a lot of things for me to check as a host by myself, but you can see Wonder Woman's on the shelf behind me, so we're all right. And Captain America right above her. See right there, Captain America? Original art. Very, very nice stuff. So today, there's no government in the world that still uses the gold standard. Even though gold is out there, countries are holding on to it. Venezuela has it. Europe has it. United States has it. Russia has it. China has it. Nobody uses the gold standard. You see, because it was completely replaced by Richard Nixon by fiat money. All of the world's currencies are still linked to the dollar, but the dollar is linked to, well, nothing at all. It's just made up money. It's just fiat money. So it's sort of declared by the government to be legal tender, and it's backed up by guns, and so people use it. But during the Great Depression, the U.S. government found that there was little they could do to stimulate the economy. When the stock market crashed in 1929, it was because the money supply had collapsed. Everything had been turned into hard assets. There was no liquidity in the market. So investors actually began trading, not in currency, but in commodities like wheat and iron and things like that. Now, as the price of gold began to rise, people started trading in their dollars for gold. And that's why the money supply collapsed. The situation got worse when the banks started to fail and people started hoarding gold because they no longer trusted financial institutions. Does that sound familiar to you? Yeah, it does, because that's exactly what people are doing today. However, there's a lot more people in the system today, about twice as many as there were then. But be that as it may, the same thing is happening today as happened then. Except that now we have a fully functional Federal Reserve. And in those days, they continued to raise interest rates in an attempt to make the dollar more valuable and to discourage people from further depleting the U.S. gold reserves. And the higher the interest rates got, the worse the Great Depression got. And, the cost of doing business just went through the roof. So on March 3rd, 1933, President Roosevelt, the flamboyant governor from New York, closed the banks. Yeah, no ATMs, no going and cashing your paycheck, no getting your money out of your account. They just closed the banks. And by the time the banks reopened about 10 days later, they had turned in all of their gold to the Federal Reserve. All of it. And at that point, people were no longer able to redeem their dollars for gold. And on April 5th, just about a little over a month later, Roosevelt ordered all Americans to also turn in their gold, all their coins, all their gold, and the certificates in exchange for paper money. And Americans were required to deliver everything they had, the coins, the bullion, certificates, to the Federal Reserve by May 1st for a set price of $20.67 per ounce. By May 10th, which is just a little over a month after that, the government had taken over $300 million in gold coins and $470 million in gold certificates. And this created the gold reserves at Fort Knox, which a lot of people wonder whether even those reserves are still there. In 1934, the government price of gold was increased to $35 an ounce, and it stayed there from 1934 all the way to 1971. And that was when President Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed price. Still, it stayed pretty close to that until 1980. And in 1980, it shot up to $895 an ounce. Yeah, it was like a hockey stick, straight up. Why? Because the government was printing the heck out of money. Because we needed more cash, because after World War II, we had this kind of permanent war class of industry which produced nothing. They produced weapons, and they produced tanks and planes and fuel and bombs, bullets and medical care and, of course, foreign bases, but they didn't actually produce anything. They only consumed. Now, this is very much like what Rome did. Rome had to end up raising their taxes because the military-industrial complex became so powerful in the Roman Empire that they had tremendous political influence over government, and it was very hard to vote against them. So we kind of got that way all the way up until, well, 2001, when they were caught. Yeah, they were actually caught. Excuse me while I take a sip of my orange juice here. What turned out was about $2.2 trillion was missing from the military's budget. And this was a severe problem. And so the following day, the next day, not a week, not a month, the next day, they brought down the World Trade Center and Building Number 7, where, of course, all the gold reserves and diamonds and everything like that were stored. And, of course, all the records of everything that happened in the government were stored in the military, were stored in the Pentagon. And as luck would have it, sure enough, that office got hit as well. So the investigation kind of ended right there, and we lost our ability to do a lot of things like move about freely like free Americans. So for years, the world powers have discussed replacements to the US dollar as the world reserve currency. You've heard it, right? The SDR, the Strategic Drawing Rights Bond that the IMF and the World Bank, the two most corrupt financial organizations the world has ever known, is trying to put together a currency known as a drawing rights bond that is basically a basket full of different currencies. The dollar may or may not be in there. And if they can back this SDR by gold, guess what's going to happen? Yeah, the dollar is going to evaporate like a bad dream. If the dollar becomes backed by gold, then the power returns to the United States, although there will be very rapid and very short-term inflation. Gold will go to something like, I will say, $10,000 an ounce, but it will very quickly stabilize and it will settle back down again. No, it can't be any less than that, because that would be deflation. It can't be any more than that, because then it wouldn't really function. It'll be about $10,000 an ounce. So another organization formed called the BRICS. This is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, sort of. I mean, there's 124, 25 nations in this group, but they call themselves the BRICS. And they have discussed this currency to replace the US dollar for, probably close to 10 years. Before, of course, the SDR has been around for a long time and not really has been of any value at all. And they've also devised their own end to the US-based SWIFT system. If you've ever wired money, you know what I'm talking about. There's a SWIFT system so that you can move money internationally. It does the instantaneous exchange, and they've created their own wire system to move money around the world. Last year, Russia and China, they took steps toward the so-called de-dollarization with the opening of the renminbi, which is the Chinese money clearing bank in Russia. And last year, I would say it probably stood a good chance of becoming sovereign, or at least solvent. But in the last year, China's economy has slid severely. They are booking less than 3% growth in the last 12 months. That's not the kind of growth that you need to be able to pull something like this off. They are also having their own debt problems. They borrowed like crazy to build ghost cities and also to advance their military industrial complex, which produces nothing, just like ours doesn't. And when you have 1.2 billion people that sort of miss that tax money, you begin to get a little bit of an attitude, and you can already see what China is doing to correct that. They did away with presidential elections. They put a monitoring system in place that monitors people's facial expressions, their activities, the way they surf the internet, all kinds of things to keep unrest down. So the unreported headline in all of this is that Russia and China are creating a framework to eventually clear transactions in gold. In gold. This is a serious thing, because we're not talking about oil, we're not talking about land or diamonds or dollars, we're talking about gold. And they have enough gold to do it. So along comes, in the last few years, a thing called cryptocurrency. Well, there are a lot of different cryptocurrencies out there. We've been using them since I was a little kid. We used to call them S&H green stamps, or blue chip stamps, or now you've seen them in the grocery stores for probably half your lifetime. Various coupons that are given out. This is all cryptocurrency. It's all money that's printed in rarity by private corporations. When you use this money that they give you, $2 off of Tide detergent, or 50 cents off of milk or whatever, when you use these coupons, you're expressing your purchasing habits to the companies that issue the coupons, so they know how to spend their advertising dollars better, and they control you, the consumer, by making you buy Gain or Tide or Arm & Hammer or whatever it is you're going to buy. This is the way cryptocurrencies work. Cryptocurrencies today are generated off of all kinds of things. Of course, the one everybody knows is Bitcoin. It's the most famous. It is based off of prime numbers, and they're rare, believe it or not. I mean, you can start with 1, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and keep going. But after a while, it takes a big supercomputer to keep crunching huge numbers way out in the dozens of powers to 10 to see if you can find a number that's divisible only by itself and 1. So it's rare, and every time one is booked, you create another cryptocurrency identification, and right now cryptocurrency is trading for God only knows what, between $600 and $900 for a single Bitcoin, but I doubt very seriously you can actually convert it into dollars for that. And I don't know that it has that much purchasing power either, but it has to have some number on the exchange, and so this is what it is. And it's had its own problems because it is not a fiat-based currency. It's based on the rarity of prime numbers, and there are other cryptocurrencies out there, probably 700 of them, and they're basically 50-story buildings. You get in on the ground floor, you get off on the 25th floor, you make money. If you stay on the elevator too long, you lose money. That's the way the cryptocurrencies work. All kinds of weird stuff going on out there, and most of it is not going to benefit you. It's a scam. So how do we get this back to the gold? Well, that's why the two guests that I have coming on in about half an hour, they're going to come on about a quarter till in the second hour. We're going to discuss this global reset. What does it mean? It's not like a National Jubilee Day, which we used to have in the Bible times, where every 50 years, all debts were forgiven, public and private, all slaves were let go, and everything was set back to zero, and you started over again. Because everybody knew in about 2 generations, everyone is going to be in debt up to their chin again, and here's the deal. I owe you $20, you owe me $20. Guess what? We're both in debt, but not really, because if we forgive the debts, then we're even. You see what I'm saying? And over time, what happens is people begin to work the system. Still, it's a 50-year plan, so it's a hell of a system. But every 50 years, all debts are forgiven, public and private, and all slaves are released. And it worked for thousands of years, but this global reset's a little bit different. What I believe that it means, and we're going to discuss this in about half an hour and going on until the end of the program probably, is that currency is going to be reset back to the gold standard. And when that happens, There are a lot of currencies that are not tradable today. They're not on the market. You don't buy and sell Vietnamese dong. You don't buy and sell Iraqi dinars. They're just not a currency anymore. All these countries have to buy and sell everything they have in other currencies like euros or yuan or dollars. But what if the dollar was reset to gold? Well, then all other currencies would be set to gold as well. There would be no value for a currency that was not based on gold. So I'm not talking about an exchange traded fund. I'm talking about physical metal, real gold like this, real gold. I don't trust the U.S. markets much these days, and as a hedge, I prefer to own the actual silver and the actual gold in bars or coins or some hard metal. No, it's not tradable on the market, but it is locked, of course, to the spot price of those metals. Personally, I'd recommend that you own some coins to keep at home. Don't put them in the bank, because if the bank closes or if your safety deposit box is seized for some legal reason or another, you're going to lose all your coins. Larger bullion, such as maybe a kilo bar that weighs 2.5 pounds, that's a lot of gold. You wouldn't want to hang on to that. You probably want to have a safe welded to the steel subframe of your house. But coins will give you immediate access to your money. You can put a few in your pocket and you could travel. Either way, you can trade into and out of dollars, euros, yuan, rubles, whatever you want with gold, because gold is actual money. Gold is currency. It is not dollars. It's not fiat. It is set. In other words, you could buy the same amount of land today in 2019 that you could buy in 1889 for gold. The same amount of land. That's the value of gold. It doesn't change. What changes is the value of the dollar. That's what changes. Remember, gold in 1933 was worth $20 an ounce. It settled at, somewhere around $35 an ounce, and it stayed there until 1980 or so, when it shot up to $1,895, and I think today it's about $1,200. So what has gone down in value? Not the gold, it's the dollar that's gone down in value. So you can use offshore vaults, you could use at-home vaults, but I prefer to have the stuff where I can reach it. The point is, you want to diversify yourself. The country you are a citizen of has no doubt debased your savings that you have in the bank, if you even make any interest on it. I know in the last few days we've seen the yellow vest revolt in France, and they have been trying to go to the bank every day and hit the ATMs and try to get their money out of the bank. And guess what? They're blocking access. Maybe 2 hours, 3 times a week, they'll let you come to the bank and try to get money out. And, it's like here. People have automatic withdrawals. They have regular things like their house payment and their car payment and their insurance payment, and maybe, a credit card payment that automatically come out of their checking account. So they got to keep money in there to cover that. So basically, you can only take your disposable money out, and it's an act that's meant to hurt the banks and establish some kind of, citizen sovereignty anyway. It's going to be short-lived. So in an era where the Western middle class is evaporating, which it isn't here, but it has several times. In 1929, it was evaporated down to the last drop. During the Obama administration, it was cut in half. In half. The middle class just about freaking disappeared. So it can happen. It can happen very, very quickly. So this is what we want to talk about. We're going to take a quick break in about 1 minute. And then we're going to bring Suzanne Ross on. We'll talk for about 15 minutes, and then we'll bring Megan and Matthew on, and we will talk about their websites. I've got them posted here. You can see. One is 7sealcodes.com, and the other is divinemsm.com. Two different subjects, it appears, but they're going to cover the same ground, and I think it's going to be very interesting. Our phone-in number, 213-233-3998, and we'll come back right after the break with them. And you that are listening on YouTube Live, hang out for about 3 minutes. We'll be right back after these messages, and don't go away. So we'll stop the streaming right now, and we'll be right back with you guys in about 4 minutes. So.